biggest Diablo 4 patch notes ever in existence. Spiritborn nerfs, new uniques, runes, mercs. I mean, look at this. Holy hell. This video is going to be a long one, but there are timestamps in the description below to any section that you're interested in. Let's start with the changes to runes because they're significant and work our way through. This is going to be good. Why runes? Because a lot of them felt completely useless, like the knock one. Gain 10 offering, inflict a crowd control that isn't slow or chill. Okay. They changed this now to gain half of the offering when inflicting slow or chill. That especially as a rogue, as a rune that will give you so much offering that finally these effects will feel useful. You can finally invoke more things. Or the Sorcerer rune, which said cast the same non-channeled skill 3 times for 50 offering, 300 offering, and you have to cast 5 skills, then become exhausted for 3 seconds. In this case, exhausted means you cannot do the effect again for 3 seconds, but getting 500 offering by just spamming 5 skills. On my Bloodlands build, I'm just holding down that button and 5 skills is like below 1 second with my attack speed, just going out. And then I can already gain 300 offering or 600 in 6 seconds to activate an effect that's always activated every 6 seconds. Oni used to be more or less useless. Cast a skill after moving. You had to like stutter step, stutter step, stutter step, stutter step. Weird. Well, this is now cast 2 mobility or macabre skills, macabre in this case necromancer, and you get 100 offering. I guess those mobility skills would be evade Spiritborn or leap Barbarian. And for the necromancer, macabre skill is bone spirit. Like spamming that twice in a row and your machine gun spamming it creates 100 offering. Not bad. And now to the invocation rune because it goes on. The spirit wolves that you summon now get your summon and companion bonuses, which is quite huge for Druid, not so much for Necromancer, but these wolves will also be able to trigger your lucky hit effects. That was said before, that now all things with a summon tag, everything that summons, can trigger your lucky hit effects. If you play an Andariel's Visage, they could trigger an Andariel's Visage. The Qual rune that gives you 35% movement speed is now 50% movement speed. Zek, that would reduce your active ultimate cooldown by 2 seconds, is changed to 1 second, but also the cost got reduced to 100, which is interesting because it has the overflow, further reduced cooldown if you pay more. And if I, for example, now use the Sorcerer rune, I could just every 3 seconds probably reduce my ultimate cooldown by 3 seconds. Good combination. And the Vex one get completely overhauled because that one was useless. Requires 1,000 offering, gain 3 to all skill ranks. No one was using this because 1,000 offering was just crazy to achieve. Now it looks different. 150 offering, plus 1 to skills for 10 seconds, more skill ranks up to 3 skill ranks. Increase the cooldown from 1 to 5 seconds to avoid overriding the overflow bonus, which means if I find something that gives me 300, 450 offering straight away, I can get the plus 3 ranks ASAP and make a meaningful use of this, especially with the ultimate changes that your ultimates have now the 5 rank bonus, and then putting more ranks in juices that even more. I love that. You had the Xen rune for 800 offering. Your next skill cast will guarantee critical strike and overpower. Offering cost reduced from 800 to 700, and there's an overflow now. Cast increases damage by 1% per 10 offering overflow. Let's assume you get 300 offering, 300 offering, and then we would get another 300. That would be 200 offering too much. And that's another 20% damage increase then to your next overpower critical strike. That's guaranteed. And the Ya one got an interesting twist. You spend 400 offering, replace your next evade with a teleport. Cool. This offering cost was reduced from 400 to 250, and overflow store access offering. Again, going back to the rune on top that gives you 300 offering after 5 skill cast, then you teleport, you had 50 offering too much. That one will be stored for the next teleport. So again, I get 300, 350, that one will be stored. So we'll essentially end up with getting a free Ya trigger every X teleports on top to just teleport more and be even more fluent and fast. The Yom rune, which used to be the best, with the Druid Petrify, has now a new overflow which increases the stun duration. Again, 300, 300, and then just stun someone longer. doesn't hurt. And they're trying to make the abhorrent Iron Maiden node kind of work, which is useless. I'm sorry, Blizzard, just give away on Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden is stupid. It does less damage, but you can gain more damage with overflow. Generally, anything Iron Maiden related is never going to be played when Decrepify is so much better. Now, the Xel rune, though, was played by almost every single build. Gained 20% max life for 6 seconds. Every overpower build was playing this. The offering cost is increased from 2 to 300. Previous overflow was increased duration, and now the new overflow is gain more max life. Increase the cooldown from 1 to 3 seconds to avoid overriding the overflow bonus. Oh boy. That is quite intriguing. You have to use a ritual rune that gives you around 200 offering to then be able to overshoot that 300 massively to get more max life and do even more overpower damage. Invoking the Spiritborn's Concussive Stomp for 250 offering is now 200, and more offering is more damage. For the Cry rune and the Spiritborn's Vortex, more offering means increased size. I guess it was fine like that already. That Vortex rune has been an absolute menace for many of my builds. I played this with Blood Surge, for example, to pull things together. Like your Blood Surging, blasting out, and just shooting things together again was super cool. Now getting an increased size of your overflow, why not? And they really want to make the Barbarian Earthquake fantasy work. The offering was reduced to 50, the damage was increased to 1,400, and the overflow updated from increased radius to increased size. So you're going to get huge earthquakes that do a lot of damage. The Barbarian Earthquake fantasy is there. Might actually play Barb just to have some earthquake fun. The Tune rune that drops the Rogue Stun Grenade was reduced from 10 to 25, and you now drop 1 stun grenade, and you have the overflow chance for even more grenades being spawned. Is a stun grenade rogue finally a fantasy that can live? And there's the Tell rune that's just also reduced to spawn even more swarms. And I told you the Necromancer Decrepify is what you want, there's no question. It will now with overflow have an even more increased duration. And as a final good thing, the chance for runes to be legendary or rare from defeating tormented bosses have been updated, and we're now getting way more of those. This is great because sometimes I felt until 200 Paragon points that I didn't have any of the actual legendary runes I wanted to play around with to make my build work. I was essentially done with the game, and then I finally found the actual rune I wanted. To the Spiritborn Vessel of Hatred game updates. A new aspect of Endless Talons or Razor Wing. Hitting an enemy increases your Eagle skill damage by 1% for 4 seconds up to 50%. Razor Wing's critical strike grants 3 stacks. They really want to bring all the skills more in line together, that everything is viable and not just a few offshots. Then we get a unique quarterstaff called the Sustained War Crozier. I hope that's how you pronounce it. More block chance, dex, max life, and up to 4 to focus skill ranks. Chance for potency skills to deal double damage. Double damage always amazing in my eyes. Your focus skills benefit from all their upgrades, and they increase the damage of your potency skills by 20% for 8 seconds up to 200%. New build fantasy with the Sustained War Crozier I like. Before we now dive into the Spiritborn changes, there's 2 more runes coming, new runes. One is 100 offering generated. Maintain at least 1 summon for 6 seconds, gaining 100 offering per summon up to 600 max. That would be straight up every 6 seconds, 600 offering. That's amazing. Either you're going to do that with the Spirit Wolves on any build, or you're just simply going to do that as a Necromancer or Druid with your companions. Really easy, really good. Then the Igni, legendary, 25 offering generated. Stores offering every 0.3 seconds, 75 per second. Cast a non-basic skill to gain the stored offering up to 500. Can either release that with a big burst, can even play that in a basic skill build to then release it with a big burst, or just get 75 every second, easy peasy. And for our Lightning Bolt Druids, for our Landslide Stormslide Druids, 220% weapon damage, cost 20 offering, invoke the Druid Lightning Bolt striking a nearby enemy, and overflow would be spawn more. Ergo, if we're going with like 300 offering in there, you're just dropping a cluster of lightning bolts on your enemy. Sadly, it's not the actual storm things that Druid does. You're not really super storm sliding, but it's another instant of damage just added on top. Now to the actual Spiritborn update stuff. Thunderspike gives you more vigor, bigger vulnerable duration, thrashes more ferocity, stinger does slightly increased damage, and hand stinger also more base damage. Concussive stomp the same, which is interesting because concussive stomp has this 600% multiplier, so that's quite nice. If they increase the damage, that's amazing, because my concussive stomp build was just going out of the way to scale this as high as possible to just have a fun power fantasy. Payback can be cast more often for free, down from 15 to 8 seconds. Touch of Death. Swarms now ignore invulnerable enemies. Interesting. Razor Wings, maximum active Razor Wings increased from 12 to 15, which feeds nicely into the new aspect. We're increasing the Vigor generation with Endurance, which will help for leveling to make it even faster. Velocity used to say if you dealt damage within the last 5 seconds and are moving, you generate 1 Vigor per second. Now it says generate 1, 2, 3 Vigor per second while moving. When we're moving like this, if you dealt damage within the last 5 seconds, because it's damage on Tuesdays, Sundays, effect on every Friday, and just generate Vigor while moving. Thank you. Way better. Bastion gives more Thorns, even though the Thorns fantasy didn't really work out the way that you wanted to, and no one actually played really Thorns Spiritborn. Acceleration gave you bonus evade charges of 1, 2, 3. They kind of cut that down because there was too much evade Spiritborn happening, and now you only gain 1 evade charge, and they actually buffed it even though it sounds like a nerf. Because instead of 10, 20, 30% damage, it's 8, 16, 24, but it used to say your next Eagle skill, and now it says your Eagle skills. That's it. Bam. For 2 seconds after evade, you have bonus damage. So if you keep evading, you always have bonus damage. Auspicious was buffed. It just now activates faster. Taking damage prevents additional accumulation of barrier for 5 seconds is now 2 seconds. And they added bonus skills, bonus effects to your ultimates if you put 5 ranks in. Protector's Domain pulses 100% of your thorns as physical damage to enemies within every second. That is for the Gorilla. Then Seeker, which is amazing with all the stacks. The Seeker damage is increased by 50% of your critical strike and vulnerable damage bonuses. That's huge. You could already play a whole Seeker build and just with 8 to 12 Seeker charges, just spam it down and have fun. Double Seeker damage. And now you could just stack vulnerable damage bonus and crit damage bonus and have Seeker go super bonkers. That's a fun power fantasy. For the Hunter, it's only the Hunter's initial damage will execute injured non-boss enemies. I don't really like that. That doesn't seem like a super buff, especially when the Seeker just goes so much stronger. And then Devourer. The Devourer's damage is increased by 150% of your healing received bonus. I guess you can definitely tinker with that and do some amazing stuff. On top, they actually buffed the Centipede Spirit Hall because it used to only reduce the enemy's damage and slow them for 3 seconds. Okay, all skills are Centipede skills. Now, hitting an enemy with Centipede skills reduces their damage still and slows them, but also deals 70% poisoning damage over 6 seconds, stacking up to a maximum of 8 times. Give them all that poison damage. Bonus. Changes to Tempering. Razorwing projectiles, they do not cast twice anymore because that would probably be broken with the aspect on top. It is now Razorwings deal double damage, which is also fantastic because then you multiply further. You multiply further with the new aspect and do even more damage. You cannot stack resolve stacks anymore, so that resolve stack stacking is gone because it's now armor plus percentage. And the Soil Augment now increases the Touch of Death duration, and the Touch of Death swarm duration was removed from the utility recipes. And when it comes down to aspects on the Spiritborn, they want to make the Bristlebass aspect work. They want you to actually play Thorns, so they boosted that up to 200%. And the Ruthless aspect, which would increase your critical strike chance with Jaguar skills, has an additional added functionality. Now always grants Jaguar skills 15% crit chance. So 15% crit chance plus the stacking crit chance. Reactive Armor gets updated because you had a 70% chance to cast a free concussive stomp by blocking an attack from a close enemy. That is now blocked attacks from any enemy, from anywhere, which is really cool for the concussive stomp build we have been doing, since it will just give you continuous free concussive stomps for insane damage. The aspect of Rallying Reversal, which gives you bonus ferocity when you crown control an enemy or apply any stagger to a boss, is now utility instead of offensive and can be put on your defensive gear. And the aspect of Acceleration, which could reduce your evade cooldown by 5 seconds, does not have to hit vulnerable enemies anymore. It just hits any enemy with a lucky hit. And the chance was updated from 3 to 5% per ferocity stack, making it even more likely for you to reduce your evade cooldown. And for our Pestilent Swarm players, the duration was increased base from 1.5 to 3 seconds, and then the additional swarm duration was reduced. In total, that should go up from 3 to 4.5 seconds and just be amazing. Aspect of Tenacity gave you tons of resolve. For each 30 to 10 vigor, you gain over 100. Now it says you gain resolve for each 40 to 20 vigor you gain while at maximum vigor. This resolve can overfill your maximum resolve stacks by 5. It took your temperings away, and they essentially changed the aspect to give you some maximum resolve stacks. In the aspect of the Binding Morris, which allowed you to deal 20% increased damage to slowed enemies, is now 30% increased damage to slowed enemies. A little bit more at every corner. Now, what do we have on unique updates? Scorn of Earth Boots used to deal 50% increased damage. Now that is your sword deals 100% increased damage. And the Band of First Breath. Casting Evade consumes 1 stack of Resolve to generate Vigor, gain Armored Hide passive effect. At the Auspicious bonus skills here, to get you more Barrier, well, that's replaced with maximum resolve stacks. So they're kind of just moving them around and forcing you to place certain equipment. And now instead of generating Vigor, which was frankly spoken useless, casting Evade consumes 1 stack of Resolve to increase your damage dealt by 20 to 40% for 5 seconds, and you still gain the Armored Hide's passive effect. Great. We're having gain 1 resolve every 5 seconds, plus more maximum resolve, plus bonus damage. And you generate resource when you lose resolve. 1 ring to do it all. Bushnakpa, which could be played with an ultimate skill damage build, maybe even with a Seeker in the future, gets some new goodies. Casting an ultimate skill restores primary resource is now replaced with maximum life. So just like straight up maximum life increase with a Bushnakpa. And the primary Spirit Hall potency increased up to 200%. If you play the Jaguar one and then you spam the Seeker ulti, vroom, just absolutely eat up your opponent. Ring of the Writhing Moons for more Pestilent Swarms has increased Pestilent Swarm damage, with a chance for Pestilent Swarms to deal double damage as well. The delay between spawning swarms is decreased from 10 to 4 seconds, more swarms, and they last longer. And the vigor generated is also risen, leaning into that Pestilent Swarm fantasy if that's what you wish to play. And the Rod of Kapaleka, which was obviously played in every single build. The 1 to 3% of bonus increased critical strike damage for each point of vigor spent this way is down to 0.1 and 0.5%. It will still increase, but it's not going that crazy. It's not going to be mandatory. Finally, some design space to play something else. And Jason Chell, spending vigor heals you for 1 to 10% of your maximum life. Every second your active cooldowns each drain 10% max life from you to reduce the duration by 3 seconds. Remaining cooldown reduction reduced from 3 to 2 seconds. Life on hit replaced with armor percentage, and spending vigor healing increased from 1 to 10% to 5 to 10%. It doesn't change really much. If you had a perfect Jason Chell, this just seemed like a nerf straight up. In the Paragon board, you get more thorns, you get bonus thorns, and then Bitter Medicine legendary note. Previous, when you heal for 100% of your maximum life, deal 20% damage to close enemies. This damage is increased by your healing received bonus. Now it says, when you heal for 100% of your max life, afflict close enemies, dealing 200% poison damage and causing them to take 10% increased poison damage for 6 seconds up to 40%. The full poison Spiritborn might finally be something people can play. Now that was Spiritborn, but there's a huge upgrade actually coming to Mercs, because the salvage material cache can now drop iron chunks and rawhide, which was a problem, and the reward scale with Torment tier. That goes also for the boss summoning cache, so if you open them in higher Torment tiers, there's more dropping out of, giving you an advantage of actually saving up your pale marks to get to Torment 4 and then absolutely bust out. The Masterworking cache giving you 2 more Opticide, because at some point in Torment 4, they were useless. They gave you so few. Torment 1, sure, but Torment 4, why do I even bother? Now it scales with Torment tier, and it's going to be great, especially as you get more obols as well for more obol gambling for more uniques. Do the Spiritborn bug fixes actually bug fixes? Like, fixed an issue where the damage increase from Vicious Shield, you deal increased damage for each 3% of maximum life versus Barrier, was calculated incorrectly and was granting far more increased damage than intended. I know a lot of people feared this, but it was straight away a bug. The same way as an issue where Rod of Kapaleka could provide stacks toward Crown of Lucian or Banished Lord's Talisman without costing anything. And the same goes for the aspect of redirected force, which would scale your crit damage with your block chance, and that was going through the roof, increasing your critical strike damage by 5,000, 6,000, 7,000% out of the house. This will drastically weaken the Spiritborn, but they are bug fixes, and it's interesting to see how much damage will now the real Spiritborn deal. Two new aspects coming to the base game for everyone. Aspect of Apogeeic Furor. Casting an ultimate skill increases your ultimate damage by 8 to 15.5%, up to 155%. At 10 stacks, your cooldowns and this bonus are reset. Spam your ultis, get more damage, get another ulti quick in a row, get more damage, get more ultis, get more damage. Great. With the aspect of Decisive Resolution, casting an ultimate skill increases your damage by 30% for 8 seconds. Gain 4 additional ultimate skill ranks. This seems really interesting for builds that really want to use their ultimate, like the Seeker build I just mentioned on the Spiritborn, or even using Army of the Dead as a Necromancer. It's going to be hard to kind of fit this in somehow. With that being said, if your ultimate skill is your main source of damage, there's something to lean into this. For the Barbarians, rejoice. They want you to play Earthquake again, and they want you to also play Hammer of Ancients. Yes. We get the Mantle of Mountains Fury, unique chest armor. Inherent, 50% Hammer of Ancient damage for 5 seconds after an earthquake explodes. More armor, ranks to Hammer of Ancients, ranks to defensive stance, and earthquakes deal double damage. Ergo, use Hammer of Ancients for a lot of damage, make a lot of earthquakes, and have your earthquakes do a lot of damage. The power of the unique item is Hammer of Ancients also forms a seismic line that deals its damage and slows enemies hit by 60 to 80 seconds. Any earthquakes it passes through explode for their total damage and are consumed. Leap forward, make an earthquake, use the rune to make an earthquake at the same time, drop your Hammer of Ancients to explode these earthquakes. It does sound like an incredible power fantasy, especially with aspect of Incendiary Fissure. Your earthquakes deal increased damage and their damage is converted into fire. So we can do fire exploding earthquakes. Whee! That sounds pretty good. Plus new tempering recipes, Vehement Augments. You can get more ranks into Heavy Hitter for ultimate skill damage. Belligerence would do basic skill damage, and Warpath gives you more damage after overpowering. The Druid wants to lean into Werewolf. You get a new amulet, which a 10% willpower increase. Greater affix on that would be preferred. Werewolf critical strike damage, movement speed while shapeshifted into Werewolf, then bonus ranks into Feral Aptitude. And the power says the value of your Lupine Ferocity's critical strike damage is increased to 150% when consecutively critical striking. The ability generally says every third werewolf skill hit critical strikes and deals 100% increased damage, doubled to 200% against injured enemies, and that bonus is increased further now. My favorite one though is the aspect of Wolf's Reign. Casting Hurricane also spawns smaller hurricanes on your wolves for 8 seconds. These hurricanes deal 5 to 15% of hurricane's damage for each active wolf. Having a lot of wolves, getting a lot of hurricanes, having hurricane duration tempers potentially should give you permanent wolf hurricanes. Is that going to be good? I don't know, but it sounds super fun. For the Necromancer, it is Blood Wave and Bone Spear. We get new pans. One is going to make Blood Wave come in like a butt cheeks clap from the side. You have a better cooldown. You have more ultimate skill damage. You fortify with Blood Wave, and Blood Wave deals double damage. The power reads, Blood Wave now forms the wave on each side, pulls enemies together, and each time an enemy is hit by a wave, they take 5 to 10% increased damage, up to 300% in total. The second unique pans, casting Bone Spear reduces Blood Wave's cooldown, maximum life up to 25%, overpower damage, damage reduction while injured, so ranks into Tides of Blood for a better damage multiplier, and now Blood Wave is additionally a bone skill, which means that Blood Wave also profits from bone skill damage. That spawns a Bone Prison at its end point and increases your blood skill damage by 40 to 80% for 8 seconds when cast. Bone Spear is additionally a blood skill and will drain 10% of your maximum life cast after hitting an enemy to consume a surrounding corpse and launch one new Bone Spear from it. Interestingly enough, you could turn Blood Wave now into a Bone skill, Blood skill, and Darkness skill. Then there's a useless aspect coming in Mobility 1. While Soul Rift is active, you're unhindered and gain increased movement speed per absorbed soul up to 60% this last 5 seconds after Soul Rift ends. I say useless one, but I'll admit that with the armory now, I will have this aspect on a pair of boots that are sitting in my armory. And if I go then into the Helltide, I will click on my Helltide farming build, and it will always pick up the Soul Rift boots to give me increased movement speed as I'm pushing through the Helltide. Additionally, the aspect of Bone Dusters, Bone Spear is guaranteed to critical strike enemies within Bone Prison and deals straight up increased damage up to 40%. Followed up by Dreadful Augment's new weapon tempering recipes. Weapon tempering. Ranks to Fueled by Death for corpse consumption damage. Ranks to Finality for more damage after casting an ultimate. Then Titan's Fall, while fortified, you deal increased damage to elites. Don't see this replacing anything we're playing pretty much right now. Rogues are getting new unique boots. Inherent casting and mobility skill grants bonus movement speed. Ranks to mobility skills, ranks to shadow imbuement, mobility skill cooldown reduction, everything pretty good. And then mobility skills are always shadow imbued with 40 to 80% increased potency. Lucky hit damaging an elite or boss with a mobility skill has a chance to instantly trigger a few shadow imbuement explosion, giving you more shadow imbuement than you ever had before. The Slice and Dice utility aspect now has Twisting Blade's initial hits cleave and has it return faster. With the aspect of Bitter Infection, enemies affected by shadow imbuement take 50% of its damage every second. Shadow imbuement deals 50% increased damage. Okay, sure, let's fucking go. And for our ultimate loving rogues, ultimate efficiency, new resource tempering recipes, Death Trap, Rain of Arrows, or Shadow Clone cooldown reduction can be tempered now. Into the Sorc, and the Sorc will actually get nerfed, but it gets a new power fantasy, or an old power fantasy is returning, because we get unique focuses finally. Yes, unique offense. Replace all chance to summon an additional Ball of Lightning affix with chance to summon a super Ball of Lightning. Ranks to Ball of Lightning movement speed, critical strike damage, chance to cast an additional Ball of Lightning. And the power says, Ball of Lightning splashes on contact for 100% increased damage and stunning enemies for 1 second if it reaches maximum range. And Super Ball of Lightnings are larger, deal 100% increased damage, have a higher lucky hit chance, and its stun duration is increased to 3 seconds. There's another focus though, which is more interesting, and that says, Inherent Ball of Lightning can cast while moving. Super cool. Ranks to Ball of Lightning. Okay, chance to cast an additional Ball of Lightning. And then Ball of Lightning orbits you, creating a static field that damages all enemies within for 180% damage per active Ball of Lightning and granting unhindered while the field is active. So you can cast while moving and have these Ball of Lightnings just rotate around you. I love that power fantasy and it's super fun. We're getting a new utility aspect. Casting a Pyromancy skill immobilizes enemies. Casting a Shock skill grants a burst of movement speed. Casting a Frost skill grants a barrier. And while enlightening, each skill grants all benefits. Okay. Interesting enough, you can use Frost skills now to make barriers if you use the aspect of Mind Awakening. We do get the Prismatic Augment Tempering recipe, which moves things away from the Conjuration Augments. Chance for Ice Blades to cast twice, chance for Inferno to deal double damage, and ranks to Shocking Impact. And now to the nitty and gritty actual balance upgrades. Yes, Hammer of Ancients, it has increased damage. And Hammer of Ancients can now strike ground areas without enemies, but will approach when a target is ergo clicking next to an enemy as you hit the ground. But if you hover over them, you will walk to them to Hammer of Ancients them. And they increased the Hammer of Ancients scaling from 2% for every 10 Fury you had when cast up to 3% now. That's pretty good. I've seen a lot of people are excited for Hammer of Ancients to return. Mighty Throw does more pulse than impact damage. Skill ranks now increase kick's damage. Can we finally do a kick build? We'll see. Mighty Kick knockdown duration increased. And now to the rank 5 skills on the ultimate. Wrath of the Berserker, which gives you that super berserking bonus, pulls in enemies instead of knocking back and deals 200% damage to them. Okay. The Call of the Ancients has the summoning tag now, so your summons now do your lucky hit chance bonuses. So if you have lucky hit chance to do bonus damage, lucky hit chance and Dariel's Visit should do poison explosion, your Call of Ancients can do that now. And with the rank 5 bonus, while Ancients is active, gain movement speed and distant damage reduction. Not bad. Iron Maelstrom gets updated to two-handed bludgeoning damage slam increased to 75%, dual wielding swing increased to 43%, and Iron Maelstrom's damage is increased by 80% of your damage to injured and healthy bonuses. I want to say that seems cool, but I cannot remember the last time I picked up anything and equipped anything with damage to injured and damage to healthy. And I told you they want you to play Earthquakes, right? Heavy Hitter, your ultimate skills deal 15% more damage. Well, now it is. Your ultimate skills, Earthquakes and Dust Devils deal more damage. They really want to force that. You have no choice. Defensive stance, increase the damage reduction gained while you're fortified by an additional 2%. While fortified, you gain an additional 2% damage reduction and heal 0.5% maximum life every second. That seems quite good. I like that. Hey, remember slaying strikes? Well, now you deal 5% increased damage to injured and healthy enemies. Ein Maelstrom. Unbridled Rage. Your core skills deal 45% increased damage but cost 100 more fury. The damage is doubled against injured enemies. I don't like damage to injured enemies because that's like, gotta delete 65% health on the enemy first to then get at the last 35% a jiffy more. And Walking Arsenal just goes from 8 to 15%, and your attack speed goes up from 10 to 20%, making things more viable. Coming back to Earthquakes, the Executioner's aspect set, killing an enemy with an overpower leaves behind an earthquake at their location, dealing physical damage. Now, your overpowers will spawn an earthquake every 4 seconds that deal physical damage over 4 seconds. Your earthquake's damage is increased by 25% for every 100 strength you have. Seems like an absolute must, strength juicing into ultimate damage build. Then the aspect of Earthquakes, which had Groundstorm create earthquakes, and you deal 10 to 25% increased damage while standing in an earthquake. Now it says the Groundstorms still create earthquakes while standing in earthquakes, and for 4 seconds afterwards you deal increased damage, and your earthquakes deal increased damage. So you and your earthquakes, both. The aspect of Bulkathis, which had your leaps create earthquakes, while standing in earthquakes you gain damage reduction. Still does exactly the same, but your earthquakes now deal another 25% increased damage. I'll like, even if I'm not interested in an earthquake build, they're like, I'm gonna do it. I'll play one. I'll have fun. The aspect of Ancestral Echoes, which can summon an ancient to perform the same skill, has now another 40% summoning skill damage bonus. The same goes for the aspect of the Ancestral Charge, adding even more damage. Aspect of Encroaching Wrath has now 80% instead of 70% maximum damage. And the Herculean Spectacle, with a Mighty Throw increasing damage and hurls another 2 weapons, is up by another 10%. Wholesale damage increase for the Barbarian. Twin Strikes stay the same for double swing, they just get a stun at the end, which is good versus bosses to add stagger. The Unbroken Chain unique gets now Slaying Strike ranks and another damage increase. And the Ugly Bastard Helmet that I have seen a lot of people use for the bonus fire damage does even more fire damage and gives you even more fire resistance. To an interesting change for the Paragon board, every 12 seconds your next skill is guaranteed to overpower. But whenever you overpower, your ultimate skills deal 10% increased damage for 10 seconds up to 80%. Just adding more. More is more. Swapping your weapons grants you 8% of your maximum fury. Is now swapping weapons grant you 8% of your maximum fury, and you deal 30% increased damage to injured and healthy enemies. One of the bonuses I again like the least because it's so damage on Tuesday, but they can't seem to let go of it. To our Druid Changes, which has Hurricane can now be cast while moving, so you don't stutter step while doing that, which kind of fits into your Hurricane Wolf run around spawn Hurricane fantasy. And they wanted to boost the werewolf like crazy. For Raging Shred, they have enemies take even more poison damage on top. The Blood Howl that was used to generate Spirit now increases your damage by 25% until you shapeshift out of werewolf. Grizzly Rage gives you an even bigger damage bonus. Lacerate, with a rank 5 bonus, increase damage by 40% of your critical strike damage bonus. Yeah. More critical strike damage is more damage, is more damage, is more damage. Cataclysm, which was already amazing, slows surrounding enemies by 70%. Well, that's useless. I'm kind of disappointed now. I was hoping for something cool. And Petrify with a rank 5 bonus resets all your non-ultimate skill cooldowns. I do like that. But I prefer all these crazy damage scaling bonuses in general to ultimate skills. To the passive of the Druid, you had Lupine Ferocity dealing that 100 to 200% bonus damage. Well, it's changed to every third werewolf skill critical strikes, and werewolf strikes deal 75% increased damage. That one can be boosted with a new unique amulet we talked about earlier, and you lose this bonus damage against injured enemies, which is damage on Tuesday's weirdness. Toxic Claws was critical strikes with werewolf skills. Now it is Shred and Lacerate and another 16% instead of 12. They buffed and nerfed Heightened Senses, if I understand that correct, because Werebear grants damage reduction, Werewolf grants movement speed, 3 and 3. Both bonuses persist as long as you're in either animal form or doubled while both are active. that double got taken away. Charged Atmosphere, which had every 14 seconds a lightning bolt hits a nearby enemy dealing 45% damage. Weird. Every 14 seconds a lightning bolt hits nearby enemy dealing 45% damage, and your lightning bolts deal 10% increased damage. Technically, with a new lightning bolt rune, you could have some fun. And the Spiritborns of the Druids are being overworked. You do not need so much to unlock them anymore, so it goes faster to unlock them. Instead of gaining 480 thorns, deal 5% increased damage to enemies for 5 seconds after they attack you. Sounds way better. Gift of the Stack is more spirit, and you gain 5 spirit every second. Huge for leveling, to make leveling less inconvenient and have you always have spirit. The Scythe Talon, which gave you increased critical strike chance, also now gives you lucky hit chance. That's kind of cool. I used to always play dealing damage has a chance to restore 30 spirit, but now it's restore full spirit. Thank you very much. Every 10th skill will cause an earth skill to overpower. Every 6th attack will cause your next earth skill. What? That is so much better. Oh no. We can finally play an actual overpowered druid, because that every 10th skill was so weak. But if we now can just spam pulverize, that's huge. And lastly, Snake Overload is now dealing storm damage, also applies an additional poison damage. Lucky hit, dealing poison damage, has a 1% chance to summon a lightning bolt on the target, dealing 120% damage. That 1% is quite low, like really low. Like, how often is this actually going to trigger? This leads us to the legendary aspects for the Druid. The aspect of the Blurred Beast gets updated to 75% more damage without seeking out nearby poisoned enemies. And Shred's first dash lands up to 4 additional strikes based on distance traveled. I will admit I've never played much Werewolf because I found the whole fantasy not super interesting. Still though, they're really buffing it like crazy. Aspect of Unsatiated. After critical striking an enemy with Shred, you gain 15 spirit, and while at 100 spirit, werewolf skills deal 40% increased damage until you go below 30 spirit. Pretty cool. The virulent aspect is now not a utility anymore, it's now an offensive aspect. And additionally to what rabies already did, you deal another 25 to 50% increased damage to enemies affected by rabies. Coming back to lightning bolts, you had the Runeworker's Conduit. Critical strikes with storm skills that you cast charge the air around you for 3 seconds, causing a lightning bolt to periodically hit enemies in a large area. Okay. Your lightning bolts deal bonus damage, and lightning bolts from the rune would deal bonus damage. Now they added another interesting thing. Instead of your lightning bolts deal 20 to 40% increased damage, it says your lightning bolts deal increased damage by 50% for every 100 willpower you have. And my druid currently has 3,300 willpower. High. Tempest Roar, instead of giving you flat willpower now, gives you percentage willpower. That's perfect for any storm-based build. And Cataclysm, which was already insane and had the Mjolnir ring to increase your damage, now also says Cataclysm receives your lightning bolt benefits. Anything bonus lightning bolt damage wise makes Cataclysm go crazy, and there's a whole Cataclysm overpower mentality build. Tempering Recipe Changes was removed. Werewolf attack speed, removed werewolf crit chance, and added damage while fortified. Heightened Malice used to give you 45% damage if there are 3 or more poisoned enemies nearby. Now it is 35% damage, but additional 5% for each additional poisoned enemy up to 4. So a slight damage increase, but on the other hand, it's damage on Tuesday now. That being said, if you're surrounded by 3 or more enemies, there are most likely more than 3 or more enemies. 2 survival instincts. While in werebear form, you deal increased damage up to 60% for every 1% difference in current life percent between you and the enemy. That one was always worded weirdly. While in werebear form, you deal 30% increased damage or 45% when you are at life full. Done. Sounds way simpler. Then you have 1% increased overpower damage up to 25% for every 1% different in current life percent and fortified life percent between you and the enemy. That is way better, and I can't wait to do more overpowered druid fancy pansy. Lastly, Ancestral Guidance gave you 40% increased damage after spending 75 spirit. Now it also says your ultimate skills deal 1% increased damage per spirit when cast. Cool, don't mind. Love it. And a slight increase to the Keeper, Territorial, Undaunted, and Werewolf Glyph to increase their damage reduction modifiers and damage bonuses slightly. Now to the Necromancer, my favorite. Blight gets an essence cost reduction, so you can spam that even harder. And if you now hit an elite enemy, you get bonus damage. And instead of paranormal blight chilling an enemy, you would have a chance to instantly freeze an enemy and even do bonus chill. That does work together with the Eben Piercer amulet. Bone Spear's damage is increased because they want Bone Spear to work. And instead of just making your targets vulnerable, Bone Spear now makes vulnerable and deals 30% increased overpower damage. No worries, Bone Spear is now an overpower fantasy too, with the right uniques and everything. Otherwise, you could go for the paranormal Bone Spear. That gives you increased critical strike chance. That is still the same. But instead of just firing 2 additional bone shards when the Bone Spear explodes, it still does that, but also gives you 10% maximum essence for 5 seconds. More maximum essence is more maximum damage with a bone key passive. Sever gets weird changes because we're now having it do more damage, which makes sense. But every third cast of Sever fears enemy and makes them vulnerable. You don't want to fear your enemies because that means they are running away from where they're clustered up. You want them clustered up. So that fear is useless. Interestingly enough, though, Supernatural Sever deals increased damage for each minion. Okay. And you spawn a corpse at the endpoint now. That's kind of cool because you can throw a Sever forward and you would instantly have a corpse for corpse tendrils. Throw Sever into a bunch of mobs, corpse tendril. Done. Easy. Soul Rift gets a rank 5 bonus where it also refills your healing potions as it sucks the life force out of your enemies. And in general, they increase the maximum stacks of Soul Rift, reduce the damage bonus, but in total brought it up from 30 up to 75% damage bonus from Soul Rift, which is insane. Soul Rift was already credible. But they buffed the other ultimates too on the Necromancer, and we'll get to that in a second. My problem is that Prime Soul Rift, which applies vulnerable to the enemies, also now fears at the end. Again, what is this? I don't want to fear my enemies. I don't want them to run away from me when my ability ends. I want everyone to be as close as possible. They increased the baseline damage of Blood Mist from 2 to 35%. And that measly Blood Mist leaves behind a corpse every second is now... Blood Mist is now a mobility skill, grants bonus movement speed, spawning a corpse every second and applying vulnerable for 5 seconds to enemies as passes through. Which actually gives Blood Mist a functionality. You could Blood Mist in, have everyone vulnerable, and then do bonus damage. Before, it was always like, why do you exist, Blood Mist? I mean, the past season, I haven't touched this skill at all. Not needed it. No reason. You got Soul Rift. The Dreadful Blood Mist also gets upgraded. Instead of just giving you 10% critical strike chance, it now gives you 15% crit chance and 10% bonus crit damage for 5 seconds after the Blood Mist ends. That's kind of cool. It's a free 10% bonus crit damage, but you would have to use Blood Mist every 5 seconds, kind of breaking the chain of boosts you're doing. Bone Prison has an overall cooldown reduction. Doesn't really matter that much, but enemies within Bone Prison are made vulnerable. Okay, cool. Which is now, enemies within Bone Prison, when it appears, are made vulnerable and take 15% more damage. Boom. And Ghastly Bone Prison get updated to generate more essence when you cast it, and if you trap a boss, it generates another 25 essence. This brings me, though, to Army of the Dead, and Army of the Dead getting super juiced. Like, not even, like, super duper juiced. Damage goes up to 120%. Volatile Skeletons Explosions now stun. Has the Summoning tag, which means it profits from all the summoning bonuses. And the rank 5 bonus says, Army of the Dead's damage is increased by 125% of your skeleton, mage, and golem damage bonuses. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking now, because they also reworked the Blood Moon Breaches to give you more ranks into golem and skeleton mages. Things are huge. Bloodwave's rank 5 says damage is increased by 100% of your damage while healthy and damage while fortified bonuses, and that is so easy to reach. I mean, damage while healthy and damage while fortified is everywhere on the Necromancer, everywhere in your Paragon board. It's going to be great. And the same goes for Bone Storm. Bone Storm's damage is increased by 60% of your critical strike damage bonus. Huh. When I can reach 3,000, 4,000% critical strike damage, and then make Bone Storm go crazy, turn Bone Storm into a shadow skill as well, maybe even use the shield again that gives me bonus Bone Storms, there might be finally a Bone Storm fantasy returning. Cool things happening with Reaper's Pursuit. It used to give us 5% movement speed when we damage enemies with darkness skills. Now it says for each darkness skill on your skill bar, gain increased movement speed and more damage as well. Huh. That's quite cute. Even if you have one single darkness skill just in your skill bar, that doesn't hurt to put a point in. Amplified damage deals damage to cursed enemies, now also feared enemies, and the bonuses can stack. So if they're cursed and feared, they would take 8% damage. Is that understood? Yeah, I guess. Hellbound Commander, instead of giving your minions damage, is now summoning damage, and summoning damage would also be Army of the Dead. Exactly. Coalesce's Blood, interestingly enough, while healthy, your blood skills deal increased damage, says you deal increased damage while healthy. Huh. That means Coalesce's Blood on any build now. Any Necromancer build wants to have points in there now. Spiked Armor gives you everything. Thorns, Armor, and Block Chance. Cool. Rathmas Vigor, the key passive, now has another 120% overpowered damage because they took that away from the Blood Moon Breaches. And Affliction's explosion damage was scaling based upon your shadow damage over time. That has been replaced with critical strike damage bonus. I still don't see where you're taking Affliction ever over anything else, but at least they're still trying to somehow make it work. They changed the title aspect though, because Bloodwave was able to shoot out waves after waves after waves after waves. That is now 240% damage, but you can no longer recast it until the last wave ends. So you're going to get triple blood waves, and you're going to wait for all blood waves to have casted before you can cast the next triple blood wave. I guess that's okay, especially as it's a 240% damage bonus. Instead of spamming blood wave, you're now going for this insane damage blood wave paired together with whatever core skill you want to use. The aspect of the Gore Quilts making bonus bloodlands out of blood orbs is now 80% instead of 60% damage. That is absolutely good. And the Bloodseeker's aspect, which has your Bloodlance deal 30% increased damage to its primary target per lanced enemy, still does that. But while healthy, your Bloodlances deal another 40% increased critical strike damage. Bloodlance might finally be just that. Just Bloodlance going crazy. And it might be time to play the Cadaverous aspect. Consuming a corpse increases the damage of your core skills by 7% for 5 seconds up to 35%. That is still happening. Consuming a corpse increases the damage of your core and ultimate skills by 7% for 5 seconds up to 30%. Might try to finally fit it in somewhere. Aspect of the Void used to pull enemies in. Now it still pulls enemies in and has a 30 to 50% chance to stun enemies for 3 seconds when it appears. Doesn't really make it that much better, but it would apply bonus stagger to bosses. Aspect of Plunging Darkness had Bone Prison spawn a pool of blight. Now Bone Prison is also a darkness skill, and therefore if it's in your bar, it gives you bonus movement speed and damage, and still spawns that pool of blight doing damage. They updated Unyielding Commander. While Army of the Dead is active, your minions deal increased damage and take 90% reduced damage. And now instead of saying your minions, you gain 70 to 110% increased summoning damage, and your minions take 90% reduced damage. What I'm asking myself is, does that straight up increase the own damage of Army of the Dead? Because while Army of the Dead is active, Army of the Dead gets activated, your skeletons come out, go and explode. That means, yeah, Unyielding Commander increases Army of the Dead's damage itself. Same goes for Aspect of the Great Feast, that it would increase the damage of your minions. Now it increases the summoning damage, ergo having Aspect of the Great Feast on also helps Army of the Dead again. Finally, as a summoner, you can actually play the Summon Super Boost skill. And since your minion's lucky hit now, you should always be Buried Up. Interesting. This brings us to the changed Blood Moon Breaches that were used for overpowered damage. Now they give you Golem Mastery and Hellbound Commander ranks. Fuck yeah. Super amazing. Previously, you also used to apply curses and deal increased overpower damage. Now you still apply curses, but you deal 20 to 50% increased crit damage to enemies affected by your curses. Curses now be applied from all your summoning skills, not just minion attacks. Enemies will always be cursed, and they'll take increased critical strike damage. Straight up a boost to minions. Actually, straight up a boost to everything, because these pans can obviously still be played by any overpower build, to just get another 50% increased critical strike damage to enemies affected by curses. Deathless Visage now scales harder. It used to scale by 5% for every 30% critical strike bonus. Now it's by 5% for every 25%, and straight away has a base 50% critical strike damage multiplier anyways. And they are reworking the Relentless Wall a little bit. The Relentless Wall is meant to give us bonus Bone Storms, which it still does, but each active Bone Storm grants 10% increased critical strike damage. That is a huge increase to your critical strike damage. And with the actual Bone Storm change, you could maybe finally play Damage Bone Storm. Good news for our Shadow lovers, the Wither legendary node that was capped at 1200 intelligence for the bonus damage with damage over time is now uncapped again, or at least better capped at 2000 intelligence, making this bonus appear more often and do way more damage. And the Bloodbath legendary node, which gave us 70% increased overpower damage, is now 100% increased overpower damage. And after overpowering, you deal 25 increased blood skill damage anyways for 5 seconds. Yeah, why not? Just make the one skill that was already incredible be even more incredible. Now to our rogue. Twisting Blade's bonus damage duration gets increased. Enhanced Penetrating Shot has another 15% bonus chance. And the Shadow Imbuement that they want to have you use with those boots, instead of just working against injured enemies, now works against any enemy. Like just infected by Shadow Imbuement, done. No more injured. Same goes for Blended Shadow Imbuement that now just makes enemies straight up vulnerable instead of having the explosion make things up vulnerable. Just Shadow Imbue, damage, vulnerable. Great. The biggest change probably is that Caltrops don't throw you away anymore. Caltrops just get dropped and that's it, which is fantastic because casting Caltrops and just flying out of the screen was stupid. Death Trap gets a rank 5 bonus with an additional pull-in effect when it appears. You at least get bonus damage, so that's kind of cool. Shadow Stab has a damage increase, and Shadow Clone is now a summoning skill, which means it can apply all your lucky hit effects. It finally scales with everything. It does all the bonuses. It does everything it's supposed to do. You're wearing Andariel's Visage, and your Shadow Clone can Andariel's Visage. Rain of Arrows gets a big damage increase, and happens all in all faster, plus a lucky hit chance increase, and Rain of Arrows damage is increased by 100% of your damage to distant bonuses. Could potentially juice up Rain of Arrows to go crazy. I always wanted to make a main Rain of Arrows build, and with that rank 5 bonus, maybe it's finally possible. Which brings us to the passives. Deadeye, you deal 30% increased damage to distant enemies. Let's go! Shadow Crush now has a better chance to stun enemies, and they buffed Precision. You don't need 4 stacks anymore, it's only 3 stacks, but casting a marksman skill no longer generates an additional stack if it critical strikes. So it's like a buff, nerf, buff, nerf. The baseline critical strike damage bonus is though increased, so it should lead to more damage if you're playing Precision. The aspect of True Sight now gives up to 55% damage instead of 30% damage while Inner Sight is active, and I'm an Inner Sight lover, so that's amazing for me. Aspect of Corruption does not work against vulnerable enemies anymore, it's just against everyone, and you get more potency to your imbued skill straight away. And the aspect of Siphoned Victuals just drops your healing potion on vulnerable enemies with any skill. It's not just non-basic skills. You can also spam Heartseeker away. The aspect of Cruel Sustenance, which heals you if you do damage with the victimized key passive Explosions, now says explosions from the key passive grant you a barrier, which is 1,000 times better than actually healing you. Because if you have a Barrier, there's no need for healing, and Barrier is always better, because Barrier does work different with elemental damage, especially if you don't have the resistances max up. And interestingly enough, the Trickster's aspect, which gave your Caltrops and Smoke Grenades your stun grenade benefits, okay, is now also working with the Death Trap. So the Death Trap would now receive your stun grenade benefits. Can we use all your stun grenades deal 45% bonus damage to ultimately juice up the damage of the Death Trap into oblivion? I mean, you could already get this to millions relatively easy on the rogue. It was just never enough power fantasy. But with all of those damage to stun grenade aspects, we maybe do a Death Trap build finally. Pretty please. I like it. It was always so much fun. You have a chest for that too and everything. To the unique items and the Grasp of Shadows, Shadow Clone Fantasy is there. It used to have lucky hit, damaging an enemy with a marksman or cutthroat skill has a chance to summon a Shadow Clone that mimics the skill. Now it is just a chance. It's not a lucky hit chance anymore. No, casting a marksman or cutthroat skill has a 50% chance to summon a Shadow Clone that mimics the skill. And the internal cooldown on summoning the clone was reduced from 3 to 1 seconds. which means you can pretty much spam shadow clones and they will be able to do all your lucky hits now. I was talking about that death trap build with the Scoundrel's Leathers. While you have unlimited energy from inner sight, casting a core skill has a chance to spawn Caltrops, Poison Trap, or Death Trap. The internal cooldown on triggering a trap is reduced from 1 to 0.75 seconds, so this can happen every 0.5 seconds now. The unique effect also grants 20% core skill damage, and your trap and grenade skills are now also considered core skills, which means that your Death Trap would profit from any core skill bonus damage too. We're already juicing Death Trap, and we can summon free death traps by spamming Barrage, for example, with unlimited inner sight. And then all my traps would also profit from any core skill damage bonus. The Word of Arcana now grants 50% increased damage to distance enemies, which they kind of need to do if you want to live that Reign of Arrow fantasy. Ambush, Canny, Chip, and Ranger glyphs are now giving you more damage. The Dance Macabre damage bonus to your next skill after casting mobility or subterfuge skill increased up to 75%. The Eldritch bonus is now 30 instead of 20. And No Witnesses ultimate skill damage bonuses increase up to 20% and maximum up to 60. That your death trap can go even more. Oh, I'm totally making a death trap rogue. No matter if it's good or bad, I want to use it. All the imbuements are now utility instead of resource. That's cool because you can put the imbuement stuff on your defensive gear. The stun grenade size is also utility now and not offensive anymore. And we're getting the agile augment, chance for shadow clones to deal double damage affix added. Hello, Mr. Shadow Clone. We're gonna go crazy. Now, the sorcerer I'm the least knowledgeable about, and I heard it's actually getting nerfed and people are mad. All sorcerers eventually use burning and conjuration builds from the developers. The focus behind all of these changes is to try and fix these outlying issues and open more build options. As always, we'll continue to monitor the effect this has on the sorcerer's power level. If you're unhappy with this, make sure that you're giving them feedback during the PDR so there are still changes happening, okay? Conjurations all now show the max limit on the tooltip, how many you can have up and at the same time. Which is actually good because sometimes I've asked how many lightning spears can I have active? How many ice blades can I have active? I like that they're working on lightning ball though, because I want to play a ball of lightning Sorc. I missed out on the ball of lightning era, so I'm happy they're doing something. It says now your attack speed is increased by 5% for 3 seconds each time you cast ball of lightning up to 20%. Then the wizard's ball of lightning gives you crackling energies when you cast ball of lightning. The Mage's Ball of Lightning deals 30% increased damage against stunned enemies. That shouldn't be a problem. Rank 5 Ultimate Deep Freeze bonus is damage increased by 40% of your vulnerable damage. That's super easy. You could do that. Wow, you can make super Deep Freeze probably. Inferno with the rank 5 bonus just makes enemies with invulnerable. Seems like a joke compared to Deep Freeze getting a huge damage bonus increase. An Unstable Current stuns surrounding enemies for 3 seconds. That seems so lackluster in comparison to the Deep Freeze bonus. I mean, they're obviously trying to get Deep Freeze closer to the others, so give you an incentive for this. But if I look at my Army of the Dead getting such a huge damage bonus increase, for example, and then Unstable Currents getting nothing, Now, I do know every sorcerer played Firebolt enchantment. Direct damage from skills apply additional burning damage. So you have enemies burning and you profit like from the burning damage bonuses. Now it says dealing burning damage has a 10% chance to heal you for 4% of your max life. That seems absolutely sad. And the Flame Shield enchantment, instead of automatically activating, says taking 30% of your life within 2 seconds activates Flame Shield can only happen once every 30 seconds. I guess with the recent changes, you don't need this I am invincible Flame Shield kind of build anymore. Season 6 definitely put that away, so not sure why we needed that change at this point. And since they changed the Firebolt enchantment, they also need to change the passives, because Devouring Blaze gave you 7% increased critical strike damage against burning enemies, right? But enemies are not burning anymore per se. Now your Pyromancy skills deal additional increased critical strike damage just like that. Shocking Impact change is nice. It used to just stun an enemy and deal increased lightning damage to them. But now it says every time you stun an enemy or attempt to stun a boss, which doesn't work, you deal X% lightning damage to them. I like that. Inner Flames, your Pyromancy skills deal 4% increased damage while you're healthy. You deal 4% increased damage while healthy. That's it. Just like that. No Pyromancy skills anymore. Just this. like the Necromancer skill that also gave you bonus damage instead of bonus blood damage now. Icy Touch, you deal 4% increased cold damage to vulnerable enemies. You deal 4% increased damage to vulnerable enemies. Same like this. Do you want these two skills now? Whatever sorcerer you play? Yes, you want. Now they changed Conjuration Mastery to Primordial Binding. Instead of gaining a stacking bonus for each active conjuration, you gain a stacking bonus for each active summon, up to 10 summons, 2% summon damage, 2% movement speed, and 4% mana generation. And they do wanted to adapt this as every sorcerer build kind of became this, how many conjurations? Can I summon the most conjurations? This is just conjuration stacking. And they're looking to redistribute this to other skills, other passes, somewhere else in the sorcerer kit that is not just about going all out on conjurations. Bringing us to aspects with Splintering Energy. Reads now, critical hits with Lightning Spear cause the spear to arc again to the target and up to 5 other enemies. This damage is increased by 100% of your critical strike damage bonus. Then the aspect of Tenuous Destruction increases damage while you have no defensive skills on your action bar, is now 50%, so just a 5% increase. And the aspect of Tenuous Agility is now tripled instead of doubled. I've yet to see a single build actually use this. The recharging aspect with the Chain Lightning bonus mana is now on the base buffed. That is actually insane, because if you find the Chain Lightning aspect and it had a 1 mana per bounce, that was really bad. But now having 2.5 base, that's incredible. I'm so happy because I love playing Chain Lightning for leveling, but it often feels so lackluster. Good. Bringing us to the aspect of the Searing Wards that now also immobilizes anything hit with the initial cast for 3 seconds. Kinda cool. It will slow and immobilize now. Just slam that on your enemies and have them stuck in place. The gravitational aspect that you needed for the Ball of Lightning to hover around you got reworked, because now you have Oaken's Catalyst, the unique item to have it hover around you. And it says after creating 7-2 Ball of Lightnings, your next Ball of Lightning implodes, pulling in close enemies before dealing 90% weapon damage in a small area. This damage scales with Ball of Lightning. That means having the gravitational aspect now on top of the Oaken's Catalyst will have you spam Ball of Lightnings to hover around you, and then it's suddenly one of them will actually implode and pull in everyone. So you're just running around, Ball of Lightning, cast while moving, pull in enemies. That sounds great, I like it. And the aspect of Armageddon will have your meteorites deal 300% increased damage while Inferno's active. Can we finally do an absolute lovely meteorite build? Because that sounds pretty damn good. Generally, a big rework coming to the Paragon nodes of the Sorcerer. Damage reduction from burning enemies has been changed to damage reduction while healthy. Okay, that should work out quite fine. The Searing Heat node will now scale with critical strike damage bonus instead of with a fire bonus. And therefore, the Burning Instinct node, though, is now scaling with fire bonus instead of critical strike damage bonus. So that gets swapped around. And they want to make Crackling Energy work better than ever or more. While you have Crackling Energy charges, your skills deal 10% increased damage. So at least one Crackling Energy. This amount is increased by 4% per 20 intelligence you have, up to 60%. When you reach full charges, your Crackling Energy damage is increased by 3 times this amount until you run out of charges. Now, I haven't used Crackling Energy in a while, but they really try to encourage you to do even more with it again. The Static Surge node. After spending 100 mana, your next cast of Chain Lightning and Charge Bolt makes enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds and restores 10% of your mana. Okay. This is now hitting enemies at least 8 times in a second with the Shock skills, restores 30% of your maximum mana, increases your damage by 40% for 8 seconds. This cannot be refreshed while active, which means that if you trigger it once, you're safe for 8 seconds, but you cannot repetitively do the mana restoring effect, which means it's a safe 40% bonus damage every 8 seconds essentially. And the fundamental release gets a little bonus on top. Your ultimate skills damage is increased by 10% of your non-physical damage bonus up to 40%. Don't mind if I just juice more ultimates. I like that. The Conjurer Glyph gives you now bonus critical hit chance. That's it. Instead of giving you conjuration duration. Phew, those were... Holy hell, that were a lot of changes. What are you excited the most about? Is it Necromancer, Spiritborn, Path of Exile 2? I'll be playing both, don't worry, and I'll be covering everything left, right, and center on Diablo and Path of Exile. Is it the Necromancer with minions? Yes, it's the Necromancer with minions. I am very much looking forward to this. If you want to see some Necromancer theory crafting, check it out. And a big thanks for giving me so much of your time.